For 9 long years, the Achaeans would attack Troy, with wave after wave, failing to break the city's impenetrable walls. But with resources running short, Achilles would lead Greece's armies south, searching for supplies, gold, and women. They would first take the island of Lesbos before landing on the shores of Asia Minor, pillaging all the towns and cities they came across as they made their way back up to Troy. From the cities of Lyrnessus and Hippoplacia, the Greeks would take many beautiful women as slaves, with Briseis being awarded to Achilles and Chryseis given to Agamemnon, 2 women that would change the course of the war. Having taken Chryseis as a concubine, Agamemnon would fall deeply in love with her. However, her father, a priest of Apollo, was not happy with his daughter being taken as a slave, and so travelled to Agamemnon's camp. He would offer the king gold and silver in exchange for his daughter, but Agamemnon refused the offer, taunting the old man by pointing at Chryseis chained to his bed. Apollo, disgusted at the way his priest had been treated, would send a plague of arrows upon the Greek armies, refusing to relent until Chryseis was returned home. Agamemnon, having no other choice, would agree to let her go, with Odysseus reuniting Chryseis with her father. But with his concubine now gone, Agamemnon would look to satisfy his desires, turning to Briseis, the slave girl of Achilles. If he would have to go without his prize, then so too would his greatest warrior. Stealing her from his tent, Agamemnon would declare Briseis his own, with Achilles becoming enraged. Demanding her return, Achilles would only be laughed at by the king, causing him to draw his sword in frustration. But as he did so, the goddess Athena would descend from the heavens, holding his arm in place and warning against such an impulsive action. Heeding the god's advice, Achilles would put down his sword, refusing to serve a king that had treated him with such disrespect. Returning to his tent, the Greek armies would have to fight on without his assistance. For a time, the Greeks would manage to fight on without Achilles, although the losses on both sides would begin to take their toll. In an attempt to end the war with no further bloodshed, both of Helen's lovers, Paris and Menelaus, would agree to duel, with the victor being declared her true husband. With both armies standing by, Paris and Menelaus would begin their duel, with warriors on each side, anxiously looking on at the 2 men that would decide the fate of the war. As swords clashed and crowds cheered, a clear victor was emerging, with Menelaus striking Paris until he fell to the floor. At the very moment Menelaus went to deliver the final blow, Aphrodite, having a fondness for Paris, would appear above them, taking his feeble body back to his bedchamber where Helen awaited. Relieved to be alive, Paris would grab on to Helen's robes with tears in his eyes, happy to be with her once again. But Helen, having seen the battle from her window, was not impressed, with the humiliation Paris had suffered so devastating that her love for him would begin to wane. Hector too would be embarrassed by his brother's failure. Realizing that the war would continue, he went to bid his family farewell. With his wife and son crying in his arms, he knew this could be the last time he would ever see them. But he had no choice. For Troy to survive, he would have to fight. Emerging from Troy's mighty walls, Hector would rally his men, pushing the Greeks all the way back to their ships, who were no match for him without Achilles' assistance. But even on the verge of defeat, with his men dying around him, Achilles would refuse to join the fight. Taking matters into his own hands, his best friend Patroclus would put on Achilles' iconic armour before charging into battle. With it appearing that Achilles had rejoined the fight, fear swept through the Trojan forces, who began to flee back to the safety of the city's walls. Seeing his army crumbling before him, Hector would decide to make a final stand, turning to face Patroclus to save as many of his men as possible. Charging towards him with his sword in hand, he would take one swift blow, striking Patroclus dead. Shocked at the ease with which Greece's finest warrior had been defeated, Hector would crouch down to remove Achilles' helmet. But when Patroclus's face was uncovered, he realized he had not defeated Achilles at all.